Good morning, folks. Today I want to take a few minutes to respond to Neil deGrasse Tyson's recent tweets. He has been in the news quite frequently, and for the starters, he is the director of Hayden Planetarium in New York City and also the host of Cosmos, a Space-Time Odyssey. So this guy recently caused an uproar with his tweet, and he said, "On this day long ago, a child was born who by age 30 would transform the world. Happy birthday, Isaac Newton, December 25, 1642. So first of all, you can see his cowardice. He would never do such tweets at a Muslim holiday like Ramadan or a Jewish holiday like Hanukkah. So he is choosing Christians because they are soft target, and in that you can see his cowardice. Lot of controversies happen around Christmas time. We all know that. In Haverhill, someone removed baby Jesus from the nativity scene and put a freshly severed head of a pig. And the bishops went and forgave him. So the making offensive statements on Christmas Day is quite common, especially from people like Bill Maher, Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett. But this one is coming from a so-called cosmologist, an astrophysicist or a scientist. So why would he offend Christians on Christmas Day? You see, is he advancing science or something else? First of all, Neil Tyson is a sort of disciple of Carl Sagan. Remember that. Tyson's Cosmos is a sequel to Carl Sagan's Cosmos. And Carl Sagan was an astronomer and was also a naturalist and a materialist and an atheist. And not surprisingly, Neil Tyson is also a naturalist, materialist and an atheist. So this guy is propagating his atheism while wearing a mask of astrophysics and science. And this is becoming quite common recently because atheistic physicists, they appear to be spreading science, but what they are actually doing is they are propagating their own biases like atheism and materialism. These guys just don't look into telescopes and tell us about stars and galaxies. They're also smart enough to tell us whether God exists or not. They say, I got this data from a Hubble Space Telescope. I got this data from a Chandra X-ray telescope. And I saw this galaxy and that galaxy, and that's all about reality. So I am so smart now. There is no God. So these guys are smart enough and they know enough about this universe that they can convince us there is no God. And this is called materialistic naturalism. So this is a highly prejudiced and biased belief. This is all I can say, the galaxies and stars, and that's about it. So this is basically a metaphysical naturalism, and we Christians are metaphysical supernaturalists. We believe there is a supernatural above the physical. But these guys don't believe there is God above the physical, and they think that it is some sort of science. You remember Carl Sagan? Carl Sagan used to say, nature was, nature is, and nature will be. So everything about the reality is nature. That's about it. There is only nature and nothing else. So these guys think that this is a scientific fact. And that is not true, folks. We have not been able to show reality is just matter and nothing else. So this guy, Neil Tyson, is promoting naturalistic atheism on Christmas Day. And read the tweet again. On this day long ago, a child was born who by age 30 would transform the world. Happy birthday, Isaac Newton, December 25, 1642. So he is insinuating that Isaac Newton transformed the world more than Jesus. This clearly shows the ignorance of Mr. Tyson. These scientists talk about things that they have no clue about. It's like you see Richard Dawkins, for example. It's like Richard Dawkins talking about philosophy and logic. And that guy illustrates what happens when a biologist leaves his lab, while this guy shows us what happens when an astronomer leaves his telescope. So they go into areas they have no clue about. Beatles' John Lennon, a few decades ago, became very famous through his rock band Beatles, and he declared, "Now I am more famous than Jesus. I am more famous than Jesus." So here is Neil. He became so famous through his Cosmos TV show, and now he had to declare to the world, "We the astronomers transformed the world more than Jesus. We are more famous than Jesus." Really, did Isaac Newton transform the world more than Jesus? So this guy should pick up Time magazine for 2014, the person of the year. See who is the person of the year. Dr. Kent Brantley. And Dr. Kent Brantley made headlines around the world after contracting and beating Ebola infection. He was infected while serving as a medical missionary in Africa. I met him recently in Asheville, North Carolina. A very intelligent and also a very humble physician. He told me that the only reason he went to Africa is he wanted to serve the people of Africa and to show them the love of Jesus. That's the only reason. Did you notice that most people who helped Ebola patients in Africa are Christians? Read Time magazine. And these people serving in Africa, I mean people from America or Africa or Europe, they can't stop quoting Jesus and God. You see the influence of Jesus on these people serving Ebola patients. These people went to areas even United Nations, WHO and CDC did not want to go. So when Ebola hit Liberia, Dr. Brantley did not leave. He knew the dangers of this lethal virus, but he stayed on because, as he told me, I did this because of Jesus. I did not leave Africa because Jesus came into my mind. Kim Jong-un, the supreme leader of North Korea, is an atheist. His country is officially atheist. He is preparing biological weapons and testing them on his own people. He hates Bible and Christianity. Recently, he got an American tourist arrested because he left his Bible in his hotel room. So he made atheism as the official policy of North Korea. You see, folks, science can make you a brilliant physician, but it does not give you any rationale that you should become compassionate and go to Africa and serve Ebola patients. If you use Darwinian logic, actually, you should listen to your selfish genes. You should run away from infected persons because it is survival of the fittest. You need to protect yourself. So you run as fast as you can when you find an Ebola patient. But that's not what these people did. Back in AD 165, when Antonine plague hit Roman Empire, the famous physician Galen, he left Rome and said he had no obligation to serve the sick. But you know, it was Christian physicians who stayed in Rome and treated the people who were struck with plague in Rome. So you see, atheism and paganism does not give you a rationale to serve the sick. I came from India, where Christians make only 3% of population. But when it comes to charity or educational institutions, Christians do more work in India than people of all other religions combined. Recently, we took our father to CMC Hospital in Vellore in India. And this hospital was started by a female American missionary, Dr. Ada Scudder. When Cornell Medical College in New York City accepted women as medical students, she enrolled and graduated in 1899 and founded Christian Medical College in Vellore, India, to serve the people of India. And Dr. Scudder became so famous in India that a letter once reached her addressed Dr. Ada, India. That's all, Dr. Ada, India. The Christian Medical College in Vellore now becomes one of the best hospitals in Asia. and serving millions of people. In 1928, when Gandhi visited this hospital, Dr. Redha told him, I want to spread the love of Jesus to people of India. I want to spread the love of Jesus to the people of India. And a friend of Dr. Scudder, Dr. Paul Brand, did so much research on leprosy at CMC and pioneered many surgical techniques. I mean, when I was in medical school, I used to read his surgical techniques. And Dr. Paul Brand, he used to say that he can love leprosy patients because of Jesus, because of the love of Jesus. Then we got Mother Teresa. When Mother Teresa was alive, an Indian news magazine conducted a poll, and it was about who is the greatest Indian since our independence after Gandhi. And most people in India, they chose Mother Teresa, folks. They said, Mother Teresa is the greatest Indian since country's independence. And in the same interview published in Outlook magazine, Mother Teresa said, I came to India to serve the poorest of the poor because I wanted to show them the love of Jesus. So see the influence of Jesus through these few individuals I told about this morning. And I went to medical schools after reading about the Good Samaritan in the New Testament. That's just one of the stories Jesus told in the Gospels, folks. Just one of the stories I read. I was inspired and I went to medical school. So Jesus' message of love has a logical structure to it. God is love. We are created by God. So it is our obligation to show the love of God to your neighbor. So naturalism would not and could not give such a rational basis for loving your neighbor. Atheism, you see, atheism makes no moral distinction between loving your neighbor and killing your neighbor. It makes no moral distinction because it has no morality. But see the influence of Jesus, folks. In the last 2000 years after his birth, no other group has done more charitable work to humanity than the followers of Jesus Christ. Did Neil Tyson know this? Did anybody started an orphanage because he was influenced by Isaac Newton? Not to my knowledge. So Neil Tyson put those astronomy books for some time and pick up some history books and read the influence of Jesus on humanity. The first universities, I mean, when it comes to education, the first universities like University of Bologna, University of Paris, Oxford, Cambridge, they were started by followers of Jesus. Even Isaac Newton, you are so fond of, he was a devout Christian. Newton believed in God and the Bible. He worshipped the God of the Bible. He wrote more about Bible than even about astronomy. He believed that God created the universe and his life's passion was to understand the wisdom of God reflected in this universe. Newton believed that the universe had a beginning. And God was at that beginning. Not just Newton, folks. When modern science was started in the 15th century, every scientist believed that the universe had a beginning. Kepler was a German mathematician and astronomer, and he's considered as one of the founders of modern science. When Danish astronomer Tycho Brahe died in the year 1601, Kepler, he took all that data from Tycho Brahe. And Kepler said it's life's mission to understand the wisdom of God in the universe. So these great astronomers like Copernicus, Galileo, Kepler, Newton, Leibniz, Tycho Brahe, Bruno, Edmund Halley, Christian Huygens, they were all devout Christians who did astronomy to understand the wisdom of God in the nature. They believed in Genesis 1 and they accepted that universe had a beginning. And the fact that universe had a beginning became so unpalatable to many atheists for so long, because it reminded people that there was a God. That's why atheists railed against that idea. David Hume, for example, challenged the idea that the universe had a beginning. He introduced the concept eternal basic element. The world is always like that. There is no God. Universe had no beginning. And atheists used that eternal existence for the universe to deny the existence of God. For much of the 19th century, God was removed from academic institutions because universe always existed. It had no beginning. There was no God. But you see what happened in early 20th century. When Doppler effect showed that galaxies are moving away, the universe is expanding. Belgian Catholic priest Georges Lemaître was the first scientist to propose a cosmology with an initial creation-like event featuring an expanding universe. And atheists, they just lost their minds. They started to mock Lemaître. Fred Hoyle, for example, when he heard about Lemaître's theory, he became so livid and he disparagingly called it Big Bang, rejected it adamantly, and went back to steady states of his universe. What was he afraid? What was his fear? He found the idea that the universe had a beginning to be troubling because beginning implies a cause and thus a creator. Atheist Mao Zedong never allowed Big Bang theory to be taught in Chinese schools because he understood what message that theory implies about this universe. Even Einstein, for all his brilliance, was troubled with Lemaître's theory that universe had a beginning. As Einstein was working on his general theory of relativity, his own equations showed that universe should be expanding. That means it had an origin at a finite time in the past. Einstein could not believe what his own equations revealed about the universe. He did not want to accept the idea that universe is expanding because the idea of expansion of universe implied that it had a beginning, which was against the common belief of secular scientists like Neil deGrasse Tyson of that day. So Einstein introduced a cosmological constant or fudge factor to correct the problem, and he restored the universe back to the steady state theory. You see how atheistic thinking hurt even the scientific thinking of a great scientist like Einstein. What happened? From Isaac Newton to Carl Sagan, Newton believed in a creator God who made this universe. Carl Sagan denied the existence of God. What happened in between? A big paradigm shift. American philosopher and scientist Thomas Kuhn made an interesting observation in his 1962 book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. He argued that scientific fields undergo paradigm shifts rather than solely progressing in a linear and continuous way. Astronomy started as an intensely theological exercise. Now atheists like Neil deGrasse Tyson want to make it an entirely atheistic paradigm. You see, folks, that's what happened, a paradigm shift. Astronomy was started as an exercise to praise and glorify God, and now it became in a vessel in the hands of atheistic, prejudiced people like Neil deGrasse Tyson. And his tweets heckled a lot of Christians, and not surprisingly, they responded in anger. And then he responded with his next tweet, and it reads like this: imagine a world in which we are all enlightened by objective truths rather than offended by them. So this guy must be singing John Lennon's song, Imagine. Imagine there is no heaven. Imagine there is no countries. Imagine no religion. This guy must be singing in his heart while tweeting, imagine there is a world where only objective truths exist. And you see the line of tweets he was making here. I mean, if he tweets this many tweets, this many offensive comments against Islam in a country like Pakistan or Saudi Arabia, he would be dead meat. So he is sparing his bigotry for Christianity. Coming back to his tweet, see what he wrote. Imagine a world in which we are all enlightened by objective truths rather than offended by them. So what he's saying is, you Christians, you and your religion are myths and fantasies. Only science is objective truth. Now let me talk about a great scientist who lived in 20th century, who viewed science and religion quite differently from Dr. Tyson. His name is Wernher von Braun. And Wernher von Braun is called the father of space flight. The father of space flight. He, more than any other scientist, brought us into space age. In 1934, 22-year-old Wernher Braun received his PhD in physics from what is now called Humboldt University of Berlin. At age 22, he did his PhD in astrophysics. And before he was 30, he was leading a team of 80 scientists in Germany. And the Nazis' rocket development program, the V2 combat rocket during World War II, it was developed by this great scientist. After the war, and he was brought to the United States in Operation Paperclip. That's an operation to bring the best German minds to United States after Second World War. So this great scientist, the father of space program, world's greatest rocket scientist, and he was brought here, and single-handedly he developed the US space program. And he sent probes to Mars, Mercury, and Venus, and Voyager to other planets. And he also laid the foundation for cell phones, satellite radio, the internet, GPS, the Doppler radar. Amazingly brilliant man. Even Hubble Space Telescope, with all its brilliance, I mean, imagine the data we are getting from Hubble Space Telescope. And he laid the foundation for these satellites, folks. And he became the leader of the scientists who placed America's first satellite, Explorer 1, into orbit on January 31, 1958. In 1962, he became a Christian. One engineer led him to Christ. Upon praying and repenting his sin, he received Christ. And Wernher von Braun said a great burden had been lifted off his heart. And he became a fervent Christian and prayed for the success of his launches. And you know, when Apollo 11 lifted up the pad, he was found reciting the Lord's Prayer. You see the humility of this great scientist. When Apollo 11 was going up, he was praying Lord's Prayer. A great scientist, much, much greater than Dr. Neil Tyson ever could be. And von Braun made enormous contributions to astrophysics and spaceflight than Dr. Neil Tyson could ever be. And this great scientist made many interesting comments. Let me read a few for you. This is Dr. von Braun saying, folks. He says, creationism is a viable scientific theory for the origin of the universe, life, and man. Acknowledging the universe is designed ultimately raises the question of a designer. The scientific method does not allow us to exclude data which lead to the conclusion that the universe, life, and man are based on design. To be forced to believe that everything in the universe happened by chance would violate the very objectivity of science itself. Certainly, there are those who argue that the universe evolved out of a random process. But what random process could produce the brain of a man or the system of the human eye? This is the greatest scientist in astrophysics speaking. Listen to those words, folks. This is the father of space flight. The father of space flight talking, and he's asking a very profound question. He's saying to be forced to believe that everything in the universe happened by chance would violate the very objectivity of science itself. Certainly, there are those who argue that the universe evolved out of a random process, but what random process could produce the brain of a man or the system of the human eye? He was exactly talking about little scientists like degrasseTyson. And Tyson thinks that he's so smart, and he could say that this whole universe came from blind chance, that even organs like a human mind and human eye could evolve from very minute processes that started under rocks and ponds like millions of years ago. And this great scientist is asking that question. What random process could produce the brain of a man or the system of the human eye? And he's saying, to be forced to believe. That's exactly what Dr. Tyson is doing. He's forcing his beliefs, his materialistic, atheistic beliefs on people at the expense of tax-paying dollars. And then there is no conflict between science and religion. Listen to this great scientist von Braun is saying. This is the greatest scientist, and Neil deGrasse Tyson could never become as great as this scientist, I guarantee you. And you see, what about the conflict between science and religion? Dr. von Braun said this, I quote, "Science and religion are like two windows in a house through which we look at the reality of the Creator and the laws manifested in His creation. As long as we see two different images through these two windows, we must keep trying to obtain a more complete and better integrated total picture of the ultimate reality by properly tying together our scientific and religious concepts." Listen to that metaphor, folks. He is saying science and religion are like two windows in a house through which we look at the reality of the Creator and the laws manifested in His creation. As long as we see two different images through these two windows, we must keep trying to obtain a more complete and better integrated total picture of the ultimate reality by properly tying together our scientific and religious concepts. So you are looking through two windows and you are gaining a total picture of reality. One window is science, one window is religion, one window is astronomy, and one window is Bible. And you are getting the picture from both windows to frame your idea of reality. You see, this is the father of spaceflight, folks. He is much, much greater than Neil Tyson or Michael Shermer or Sam Harris or Daniel Dennett or Richard Dawkins. He is the father of spaceflights. He became an ardent Christian, a follower of Jesus, and did so much for spaceflight in the last century. And he was also a very humble man. He prayed while Apollo 11 was going to moon. So that is the kind of humility he has. Tyson had no such humility in his tweets. Imagine a world in which we are all enlightened by objective truths rather than offended by them. You see the arrogance of this man. Science is not the only domain of objective truths. The birth, the life, ministry, the death, and the resurrection of Lord Jesus Christ are historically grounded objective truths. The message of Christ, and it is impacting the hearts and minds of individuals. And Neil, if you can't pick up a book on Christian history, go and watch Angelina Jolie's movie, Unbroken. This movie is about Louis Zamperini, a World War II prisoner of war survivor. And his story is after their bomber flight crashed into ocean, Zamperini and his friends, they spent 47 days adrift on a raft, barely surviving. And they were caught by Japanese Navy, and as a prisoner of war, the Japanese tortured him in the most cruel ways possible. And after his release, Zamperini developed PTSD. He was in a televised interview and he said that he was going through nightmares about strangling his former captors. And he began drinking heavily. And then he wanted to commit suicide. And you know what happened? His wife, Cynthia, one day took him to an evangelical crusade held by Dr. Billy Graham. And in 1949, and Zamperini, after listening the message of love of Jesus, he committed his life to Jesus. That's Louis Zamperini's story. A great Olympic athlete, a prisoner of war, tortured by Japanese. And you know what he did after he became a Christian? He went back to Japan and he met his former tormentors. And he said, I forgave you. You know, I forgive you because I love you. You know why I love you? Because I should love you as Jesus loved me. Because of Jesus, I forgive you and I love you. That's what Louis Zamperini said. And Neil, that is how Jesus is influencing the lives of individuals, even to this day. Neil, your cosmic science is not going to heal the wounded hearts and minds of people like Louis Zamperini. It is Jesus who is transforming the lives and minds of people. It's not Isaac Newton. And Neil, I recommend you go and watch this Angelina Jolie's movie on Louis Zamperini. It's about the forgiveness Jesus gives us. That's the way, the peace, the mind that Jesus gives us. And Neil Tyson should leave that arrogant attitude and those arrogant tweets on Christmas time so that people can reflect on the love of Jesus. And I invite even Neil Tyson to do the same. Leave that, enjoy your science. I tell the same thing to Neil Tyson also. Enjoy your science. From Isaac Newton to Kepler to Copernicus, Galileo, they all used science to glorify God and to see the wisdom of God in the universe. That's the way science should be done. Not this way as Neil Tyson doing, like looking through some telescopes and then propagating his materialistic bias, his naturalistic, atheistic beliefs down the throats of the people. That's not the way science should be done. Please write me your comments, folks. My email is info@godandsciences.org. That is info@godandsciences.org. Thank you very much.